It's the most crazy disinformation campaign I've ever seen.
Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Hope you're all having a great day. And a quick shout out to my newest patrons, Marianne and Paul. I greatly appreciate your support. Now, before we get into this and some of Biden's comments and certain things with GM and Mary Barra and Mexico and the UAW and what's really going on here, I just want to say, I'm not like anti-Biden. I don't get too far into politics. So if you're a Biden fan, please do not feel like I'm attacking you or anything like that. This is just his lack of acknowledgement of Tesla, yes, but it's actually way more than that, and you'll know why here shortly. So let's have a listen to what he said, and then we're going to break it down.
We risk losing our edge as a nation, and China and the rest of the world are catching up. Well, we're about to turn that around in a big, big way. We're going to be building again. We're going to be moving again. And folks, when you see these projects starting in your hometowns, I want you to feel the way I feel, pride in what we can do when we're together as the United States of America. And it starts here in Detroit. In the auto industry, Detroit's leading the world in electric vehicles. You know how critical it is? Mary, I can remember talking to you way back in January about the need for America to lead in electric vehicles. And I can remember your dramatic announcement that by 2035, GM would be 100% electric. You changed the whole story, Mary, wherever you are. There you are. You did, Mary. You electrified the entire automobile industry. I'm serious. You led, and it matters. And drastically improving the climate by reducing hundreds of millions of barrels of oil that will not be used when we're all electric. Look, we're going to make sure that the jobs of the future end up here in Michigan, not halfway around the world. You know, that means that here in Detroit, you're going to set a new pace for electric vehicles. This is not hyperbole, this is a fact. With this infrastructure law, along with my Build Back Better plan, we're going to kickstart new batteries, materials, and parts production and recycling, boosting the manufacturing of clean vehicles with new loans and new tax credits, creating new purchase incentives for consumers to buy American-made, union-made clean vehicles, like the electric Hummer. Folks, or the Silverado, or any other of the 20 or more vehicles that GM's going to come out with in the near term that are electric. And spurring demand by covering federal government's enormous fleet of vehicles is what I'm going to do. I pledged when I ran. We have thousands and thousands of vehicles in the federal fleet. They're going to all go electric, all of them, down the road, supporting electric transit systems, electric school buses. And of course, that's not all the law will achieve.
So I guess my first problem here is, of course, Biden saying that GM has been the leader in electric vehicles. In case for some reason you're new, this is just factually incorrect. If you take a look at any type of data, you will see Tesla is indeed the one and only leader in electric vehicles. Any other statement contrary to that is just patently false, no matter how you try to interpret the data. And I have to say it, whether it's Biden saying it or somebody else, it's just a major disgrace. It is shameful. It is a complete oversight of literally one of the greatest American success stories of all time, totally being brushed aside, swept under the rug, ignored, and they're trying to champion and bolster these other companies who are only even talking about EVs because Tesla exists. Now, that said, there's actually far more to this story, as we talked about with the UAW. So I just want to be clear, this event, it was really just a pep rally. It was a 100% rah-rah, chant, this is where we're going. It's a feel-good, play good music, get everybody hopeful for what's to come in this new wave of industry. And pair to that the fact that, yes, I get it, Biden has to support the UAW. It's part of his political base. They have a long-standing relationship. And as we mentioned before, not all unions are bad. I am not anti-union by any stretch. However, as I said, there are some data points we need to look at. My second big problem with this whole situation is that GM is being championed as an American company leading the way in the electric revolution, where when you actually look at what's going on, they're making a ton of their vehicles and getting a ton of their parts in Mexico. So they're clamoring for these subsidies from the US government, and then they're going to take them and then create these jobs in Mexico, not even in the United States. As we see here, GM to invest $1 billion in Mexico for EV production, which, you guessed it, angered UAW members. And this is a statement from the vice president of the UAW. At a time when GM is asking for significant investment by the US government in subsidizing EVs, this is a slap in the face for not only UAW members and their families, but also for US taxpayers and the American workforce. And new figures show the American automotive giant GM is now the biggest producer of vehicles in Mexico. The figures were reported by Automotive News, which also wrote that Mexican production represents 1/4, 25% of all of GM's production for North America. Why, you may ask? It's pretty simple. Manufacturers continue to benefit from the lower salaries earned by Mexican workers. GM tries to explain the figures by pointing to market trends that show consumers turning away from cars which are built in the US in favor of pickups and SUVs which are assembled in Mexico. But GM probably had a good indication that this was going to be the trend, so where should we produce our highest volume vehicles? Well, where the labor is the cheapest. And even certain cars that are being technically built here in America, you have stuff like this, where technically the truck is being assembled at the US plant in Roanoke, Indiana, but only 42% of its components come from elsewhere in the US or from Canada, while 46% are made in Mexico. And yes, there is even more, as the UAW isn't really fully supportive of electric vehicles and the targets that the US government has been setting. Biden failed to say that UAW did not endorse the EV targets he set in an executive order signed last month. The union's support is also dependent in part on robust government support for union-made cars in the form of tax credits in legislation pending in Congress, something that is far from guaranteed to happen. The UAW has in fact voiced concerns about being too hasty with the EV transition because of the potential impact on industry jobs. Since EVs generally have 30 to 40% fewer parts and are easier to build, fewer workers will be needed to assemble them. And listen to this, the big three automakers, which are not the big three anymore, Ford, GM, and Stellantis have made it clear a dramatic shift to EVs can only happen with incentives for EV purchases, adequate government funding for charging stations, and money to expand EV manufacturing and parts of the supply chain. Simply put, the big three are saying this transition can't happen with huge government money basically given to them to make this change. Well, let's take a look at Tesla. And look, anybody that says Tesla wouldn't exist without money from the government doesn't know what they're talking about. They've paid back their loans. They paid it back 9 years early with interest. They've never been bailed out. It's been incentive money that was given, whether it's from the state level for a factory, which is just how the world works because businesses in a state are going to bring revenue and jobs. It's not a Tesla thing, it's a worldwide thing. So do not fall prey to all the FUD out there that Tesla only exists because of billions of dollars from the government. It's fundamentally untrue. And a lot of those numbers, they're actually talking about contracts that SpaceX has won. They're somehow conflating SpaceX and Tesla. So it's just not true. Do not listen to it. So the last thing I want to say about this matter is it really is disheartening and sad that the government is so far gone and has their head so far in the weeds and tied to the UAW and all of these things. GM asking for money to take it and then build cars in Mexico and all of this going on. Meanwhile, Tesla is just doing their thing, executing, providing value for customers, and the government's going to choose to overlook it. So this shouldn't come as a surprise. However, every time something like this happens, it is definitely disappointing. But here's what I want to say. In the end, the truth will win. In the end, Tesla is going to win. They are winning and no one's going to stop them, no matter what the government says or what type of pep rallies they do for all these other companies that really haven't done anything for the EV movement to date. So ultimately, all of these empty comments and promises are going to fall flat. Tesla will continue to execute. It's going to be all good. They're going to continue to win no matter what the government is doing. And next up, we have one more item with regard to corruption, and then we'll move on to some good and uplifting Tesla news. So Consumer Reports comes out with their latest reliability report, and Tesla is basically second to last. As you can see, Tesla in 27th out of 28, and if you take a look, the Model 3 comes in with a score of 59. The Model S, Y, and X are all 20 or below. So those would be basically very poor reliability scores. And at the top of the list, we have Lexus, Mazda, and Toyota, all 70 or above. So this guide is supposed to show how well vehicles have held up and the odds that an owner could be inconvenienced by problems and repairs. And for me, I pay very little attention to these guides and reports. I mean, just look at the wait time for Teslas. That tells you everything you need to know about satisfaction, reliability. And one interesting thing, so for Consumer Reports, this is directly on their website, their philanthropic partners. The first one listed is the Ford Foundation. Ford is one of the biggest donors to Consumer Reports. Take that for whatever it is worth. And we always need to remember what Elon said back in 2018. The problem is journalists are under constant pressure to get max clicks and earn advertising dollars or get fired. Tricky situation as Tesla doesn't advertise, but fossil fuel companies and gas and diesel car companies are among the world's biggest advertisers. So yes, it's very disappointing that our world operates like this, but do not let it get you down. It's been operating like this for a long time. Tesla is still succeeding and they will continue to. As I said, the truth will win. Elon doing the right thing, building excellent products, trying to make the world a better place, to preserve the consciousness of humanity, to make it a multi-planetary species. It's just going to win out. The support will be there. But okay, let us move on to some actual news. So from Gary Black, the latest on the EV credit in the House for the Building Back Better Act. Tesla buyers should get an instant $8,000 EV rebate for Model 3s under $55,000 and Model Ys under $80,000 if your adjusted gross income does not exceed $250K for individuals or $500K for couples. Senator Manchin will likely kill the $4,500 bonus for union-made EVs. That would be great, but only time will tell. Next up, here we have a really cool story from Ontario. So, a new purpose-built rental apartment building in Welland, Ontario is aiming to reduce carbon emissions. Great. One way in which it's going to achieve that is by providing a Tesla Model 3 for tenants to rent. This 129-unit complex is being built by Elevate Living Niagara, and the Model 3 will be available to rent at the same price as public transportation. It's so folks can have access to reliable transpo at an affordable rate and a way that's better for the environment. Furthermore, residents will also have access to electric scooters and bicycles. The Tesla is being offered through a partnership with the car sharing program Kite. So a very cool story here. Hopefully we see more like this in the future. And here we have some more actually very exciting news, more than you might initially think. So from Marco on Twitter, just unearthed an agreement between Tesla and Buc-ee's to install superchargers at 26 different stores across 7 states, many of which are indeed in Texas. So here we have the list, and yes, as you can see, a lot of these locations are in Texas. Buc-ee's is a very well-known, very popular, and well-liked place. It's kind of one of those places you stop on road trips and you grab a bite to eat, and a lot of these have very high visibility, so it's going to make the Teslas and superchargers much more apparent to people who might not be familiar with what's going on. Now, full disclosure, I've never personally had the privilege of attending or visiting a Buc-ee's, but let me know below if you have, and is it as good as everybody online is saying? Next up, a fun update here. With the latest Tesla app, you can customize the quick controls on the vehicle homepage with a long press. So what people are saying is that now you will reportedly be able to have that trunk button on your widget and open and close the trunk with a shortcut. You can also adjust the cabin overheat protection. There are widget improvements and the Sentry Mode live camera access on supported cars in selected countries. So here we have a cell phone screenshot, and as you can see in the little widget column, you have the frunk and the trunk buttons, or the widgets, the quick control access. So there you have it. Nice to see. Now, next up, this news item to me really isn't news. I think we kind of knew or expected this to happen. But if you go back and remember the $137 million award that the court ordered Tesla to pay for that racial harassment case, well, Tesla is basically challenging that and saying that the amount was absurd, and they're arguing to get it lowered, at most saying it should have to pay $600,000. In a court filing Tuesday, Tesla called the sum staggering and asked the judge to step in and reconsider the decision. Alternatively, the company wants a new trial, or for that $137 million in damages to be cut down significantly. Lawyers for Tesla argued that based on comparable workplace racial harassment cases, the company should be on the hook for $600,000 at most, $300K in emotional distress damages, and $300K in punitive damages. Tesla said the jury award here, a staggering $137 million, simply cannot stand. It's an award without precedent in U.S. anti-discrimination law. It dwarfs awards in similar and even in the most egregious cases. So we'll have to wait and see how this one proceeds. Tesla Solar on Twitter shared 250,000 Powerwall installs globally. This one from Henry on Twitter. I want to thank the Tesla team for installing my solar in Powerwall. You have a great team. Thank you, sir. So big milestone for Tesla Energy, and once again, really just the very beginning. And in case you missed Elon's comments yesterday, I've included a link to this video below, but a quick summary: the first orbital launch attempt will be January or February. The launch of commercial payloads will be in 2023, 1,000 starships for life to become multi-planetary, 2 or 3 uncrewed Mars landings before attempting to send humans, and there should be around 12 Starship launches in 2022. And in other news, over at Giga Berlin, we see 3 new Model Ys spotted exiting the factory production floor at Giga Berlin. All 3 of these Model Ys made loops on the test track, and Tesla Facts is saying it was very likely locally produced, as calibration units don't come in triples and don't use the test track. Tobias Lind added at 5:58 3 Model Ys rolling out of the factory. You can see them on the test track behind the trees. That doesn't necessarily mean they were produced at Giga Berlin. Maybe they're just calibrating machines, but it's a good sign. So people on both sides of the argument here, but either way, activity over at Giga Berlin. So hopefully we can get past these objections in this review here in the next week or two and then move on to production. And I'll send you guys off today with some comments from Kramer. It's like one day he's anti-Tesla, championing Ford and how they're ready to take him down, and then the next day he's talking about how Tesla is one of one and they're going to be the next Amazon and no one's going to compete with them. So it's like, I hesitate to even talk about it, but interesting comments nonetheless. So here you go. But that's all for today. Please take a second to like the video if you did. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.
But it's entirely possible that Tesla is Amazon and that there was no second Amazon. So even though I like all these companies' cars and they look really good, the idea that they could have 17,000 reservations for a Lucid, and you could make 17,000 Fords in a minute, and somehow Lucid's worth more than Ford, does create problems mentally. But I will say that Lucid's cars I'm sure they're going to sell out, and Ford's aren't. But anyway, look, I said to club members, the best way is to play Ford, because if Ford decided out of nowhere that they just wanted to be an EV company, they would be worth a lot more than they are selling right now. And that's kind of a strange thing. But if they shut down everything but EV, their stock would be worth more than Lucid.